I'm excited about starting this new series on being stronger in families. We're talking about being stronger all year long. And in this season now, we're going to be talking about how can we be stronger in our families. Because I'm going to tell you, that's the foundation in a church, in your life, is the family. And so I want to talk today about how we can grow a healthy family. Now, if your family is already gone and they're out, this message is still for you because you still influence your children and you influence your grandchildren. So this message, if you've already finished with your parenting, this message is not to put you on a guilt trip. This is not, I don't want you to go point one, point two, oh man, I didn't do that. Oh, point two, oh man, I really messed that one up. Don't sit there and put yourself on a guilt trip because I want to tell you, you always have an opportunity to redeem things. You always have an opportunity to, I remember when I told both my kids when they were grown and gone, and I said, hey, I want to give you the opportunity. If there's some things I didn't do right and some things that are unsettled and some things that I just kind of messed up, I want you to have an opportunity to share that with me because I want to confess it. I want to ask for your forgiveness. I'm not going to defend myself or anything. And I was hoping, that they would say, oh, no, Dad, you were great. You did. And my son looked at me and said, hey, I'm going to really pray about that. I thought, oh, great. and so then we got together, and he had his little list. I thought, oh, this. And then I noticed when he was going through his list, he didn't have anything that I thought he was going to put on there. And when he finished his list and we talked about it and got through it, I said, wait a minute, is that it? He said, yeah. I said, what about this? I remember this time I really blew up at you, and he said, I don't remember that. Oh, great. He learned to shut me out, and I was fussing at him. He didn't hear a thing I said. But I remember some distinct times where I walked away and said, wow, I really blew that one. And he didn't remember it at all. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. The things that he remembers, I don't remember, and the things that I remember, he doesn't remember. So you need to have those conversations with your grown adult kids, that you just sit down and make sure you clear the air. Anything that you need to settle, anything that they're harboring or something that's there that they felt like you didn't do them right or you wounded them, or take the time to have those conversations. So this is not the time to beat yourself up. This is the time to challenge yourself and to move to where you need to be. So I want to encourage you in that. So let's talk about how to grow a healthy family. And as our foundational verses is Proverbs 24. He says, a house is built by wisdom. Not man's wisdom, God's wisdom. It's built by wisdom. Remember the guy who wrote these words, he's the guy that God came to and said, you can ask for anything you want and I'll give it to you. And he wisely asked for wisdom. And God was so pleased with that. And God says, I'm going to make you the wisest guy that's ever lived. And so he is the wisest man to ever live is making this statement. He said, a house is built by wisdom and becomes strong through good sense. Through knowledge, its rooms are filled with all sorts of precious riches and valuables. Now, I don't think he's talking about things that you buy at the store. I think he's talking about family. I think he's talking about life. That the precious riches and values that we have in our house now are memories and pictures of our kids and grandkids. Those are the precious riches and valuables we have in our house. It's kind of like the house catches on fire. I'm grabbing the pictures, because that's the most valuable thing I've got in the house. So now how do you grow a healthy family? So I want to give you 4 things today to think about. Number 1, prepare your kids for life. You got to get them ready for life. And you only have them for a season. And your job is to prepare them for what comes after their time with you. In fact, in the family, that's where you learn life's basic skills. You learn how to walk, you learn how to talk, you learn how to use a smartphone. Oh, wait a minute, that's what the kids teach you. You don't teach your kids that. Our granddaughter is 2 years old. Mary and I were up there Friday at Mac and Meredith's house, and Cyrus comes up, hugs Grandmommy, and grabs her cell phone. And she knows how to, it's 2-year-old now. She knows how to get in her phone. She knows how to find the app that she wants and to find the movie she wants to watch, and she's sitting there watching her favorite movie. And 2 years old. So, she's the one I call when I'm having technical difficulties with my computer. The Bible says in Luke chapter 2, Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature and favor with God and with all people. So notice what it says. First, Jesus grew in wisdom. That's mental and intellectual growth. He grew in stature. That's physical growth. He grew in favor with God. That's spiritual growth. He grew in favor with man. That's social growth. So all 4 of these things are things that you're helping your kids to grow in wisdom, stature, and in favor with God, and favor with man. So you're teaching them how to grow intellectually, how to grow physically, how to take care of yourself properly, how to grow spiritually, and how to grow socially. That's part of teaching your kids and preparing them for life. In fact, that ought to be the goals that you have in your family for each of your children, is balanced growth. You need to teach all 4 areas, not just dominate on 1 or 2. You need to teach all 4 areas. And the Bible is very clear that the primary person that is to raise children and to help them prepare for life is laid at the feet of the parents. It's laid at the parents' feet. It's their responsibility. In fact, the moment that you took part in conception, you got a job description. And you took on a role. The Bible says in Deuteronomy chapter 6, even though this is like Old Testament, you say, well, wait a minute, I don't think we have to, live under that. I want to tell you, there's so much wisdom in the Old Testament and so much truth, and so we take the truth from the Old Testament that needs to be applied to our life, and this is one of them. He says, and you must commit yourselves. So you, not the government, not the private school, not even church. It's not the children's pastor or the youth pastor's responsibility to raise your kids. They're here to just help you. They're here to supplement what you do, but that's your responsibility. So you must. That's not an option. He's not saying you if you get around to it. You if you have the time. He says, no, you must commit yourselves wholeheartedly. So it begins with you, that you make sure you're living a believer's life. You make sure you're living a life that's honoring to Christ. So you first commit yourself wholeheartedly, holding nothing back, to these commands. So you make sure that you're doing it first. He says that you wholeheartedly to these commands that I'm giving you today. Then he says, repeat them again and again to your children. Talk about them when you're at home, when you're traveling, when you're going to bed, and when you're getting up. So you talk to your family about these things all the time. I want to tell you, every time you're with your kids, there are opportunities to speak biblical truth into their lives. And you don't have to quote Scripture to teach biblical truths. You can tell them, you can teach them principles that apply to multiple areas of their lives. And so you're to take advantage of every opportunity. And you know what? I want to tell you, some of the best growth opportunities with your kids are at the most inconvenient time for you. You're tired. You've had a hard day. You're ready to have a little daddy downtime. And your kid comes up, and they crawl up in your lap, and they want to talk to you. And when you say, hey, I'm tired, let's talk later. Well, later, they don't want to talk. They're already into something else. One of the things that I learned with my son, when we're talking, if he gives me one-word answers, it's going to be a short conversation. But I want to tell you, both Mary and I, even today, like when he calls us, we stop whatever we're doing because he wants to talk. And we have that deal with both our kids. When they call or when they come up and they initiate, we stop whatever we're doing and we give full focus on them because they need to talk and they want to talk. And we tried to do that growing up. There were times, the kids would come in and say, hey, let's go play ball. I didn't want to do that. But I knew I had a window of opportunity and I had to take it. Now, here's what you learn from your family. You learn about relationships. I mean, your kids need to learn how to handle relationships because they're going to be dealing with that the rest of their lives. They need to learn about character. They need, character, that's the sum total of your choices and habits. So you're teaching them character is what determines your character are the choices that you make, the habits that you develop, and that it's definitely far more caught than it is taught. You see, they're learning most of this just by watching you, not listening to you. Oh, no, I'm not talking about when you sit down and have one-on-one conversation with them. I'm talking about their observations. And they hear things, oh my goodness. I remember one time my nephew and niece was at my house, and Katie was probably she was probably in the 4th grade or something like that. And so we were sitting there talking, and Kay looked over at me and said, hey, Dad, what was it you were saying about, and she named my nephew. She said, what were you saying about him that he didn't know nothing? And I'm sitting there going, oh, my goodness, out of the babes of mouths. And I was thinking about how am I going to get out of this one? So I told him that she didn't. She lied. And and in that moment, I realized, she caught that from me. I didn't sit down and tell her that, but she heard me say that. She caught that. So what are the things that your kids are catching from you? Listening to you talk on the telephone. How you handle a tense situation, how you handle a customer service person that you really want to cuss out. So they catch that. So what are you really teaching your kids in character? And then values. I mean, that's what's really important in life. Teaching your kids work values, work ethics, teaching them life values, teaching them money values, teaching them time values, teaching them the values about people, about the values of the world, and what God has to say and what the world's going to say to them, and teaching them the values about the future and how to think about how they need to see the future and how they need to see God. Now, I've had parents even in church say this to me. They'll say something like, well, Pastor, I'll ask them about their kid who I hadn't seen in church in a while, and their kid's like in high school and something, and they'll say, well, they just don't want to come, and we've just decided we're not going to impose our spiritual values on them. I'm just going to let them decide for themselves. And I say, well, let me share a Greek word with you. It's called baloney. Are you kidding me? I mean, that's you basically are telling your kid God is an option. God's what you do when you don't have anything else in your schedule. He's not an option. In fact, you're hurting your kids when you tell them or show them that God's an option. And I'm just going to tell you, parents, as long as your kids are under your roof, in fact, not just your physical roof, as long as they're under your financial roof, then you have the right to impose on them certain standards. So don't apologize for that. It's just not an option. We had an exchange student from Germany come live with us. And when we talked on the phone for a long time while she was still in Germany, and we said, hey, we just need to just let you know something up front. Well, we don't know if you're involved in church or anything, but, I'm a pastor of a church, so we do church. And so we go to church every Sunday. And so in living in our home, that, you'll be engaged in the church life. And so she moved here, and she came, and And the first Sunday, no problem, came, got ready. She was at church. And then the next Sunday, we knocked on her bedroom door, and both of our kids were still at home then. And she was asleep. And we said, hey, it's time to go to church. Oh, I already did that. I said, wait a minute, what? She said, yeah, I did that last Sunday, so that's it. I'm done. I said, oh, no. Maybe we got something lost in translation here. So when you have trouble translating something to somebody in English, you just say it louder and slower, and then they'll get it. And that's what most Americans think. So we explained to her. I said, no. So this is how it works. And so she reluctantly did that. And I'm not sure what was the end result. I'm not sure whatever happened spiritually. But I do know this. She started dating a guy who was totally unchurched. And he started coming to church with her. I had the opportunity to win him to the Lord and baptize him. Then his parents came to church. I had the opportunity to win them to the Lord. And, so God used a non-believer from another country to win a whole family to Jesus. Because we wouldn't renege on our values. And it was really interesting. She called me. She said, hey, and she'd gone back home, and she's, and this several years later, she called me, and we still stay in touch, and we stay connected. And she said, hey, I'm getting married, and I married a guy from France, and we're going to get married in Normandy, and you've got to do our wedding. I said, yeah, I can do that. And so I had the privilege of flying over there and doing their wedding, and that was such a cool event to influence in that. But to think that you're to let your kids just figure it out on their own, you're basically advocating your responsibility to the school system, to social media, to the world. Are you sure you want to do that? Isaiah 38. Every generation tells of your faithfulness to the next. Number 2, if you want to have a healthy family, you got to protect your kids in the storms. Notice I say in the storms, not from the storms. You protect them in the storms. Proverbs 14:26. Those who fear the Lord are secure. He will be a refuge for their children. Do you see that? When you as a parent properly fear God, biblically, the way you're meant to, that actually becomes a refuge for your kids. Now, there are types of storms your kids are going to experience. You've experienced them. One is change. Life is full of change. Some change is good, some changes aren't, and they hit us hard and emotionally wipe us out, but change is going to happen. Number 2 is failure. They're not going to make the team. They're not going to make the grade. They're not going to accomplish something. They're just, there's going to be some failures at times, and that's going to be a storm for them. And let me just tell you something. As a parent, when your kid is going through those things, don't minimize it. Your job is to help them through it. In fact, the last storm is the toughest storm of them all. And that's the storm of rejection. When your kid gets rejected, especially by peers, that's the worst. That's hard. And your kids, they're going to experience that. They're going to experience the rejection by a person they want to date. They're going to experience that. And a family is a place of shelter during those storms. And church is a family. And church needs to be a shelter during those storms. Ecclesiastes 4 says 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Family needs to be a safe place. Mark 3 says a kingdom divided by civil war will collapse, but similarly, a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. So, how do you protect your kids when a storm hits? Well, hear them, listen to them. Don't be quick to give an answer. In fact, sometimes you don't need to give an answer at all. You just need to listen. When your kid starts talking and you know what they're talking about, so often we're tempted to interrupt them and go ahead and finish the story and then tell them what the answer is. They don't need that. They need you to listen. So just close your mouth and listen. You might learn something from your kid. So just listen to them. And then sometimes you just have to hug them, express affection to them. Sometimes they just need to just crawl up in your lap and be held. And then you hope with them. You build them up with affirmation, not false affirmation, but you build them up with affirmation. And then you help them. Sometimes you're the one that helps them, but sometimes you need help outside the family. I mean, if my kid comes in with a broken arm, I don't say, yeah, I can fix that. No, I get help from the doctor who can. Well, sometimes your kid has some serious emotional things they're dealing with, and they need help beyond what you're able to give them. You're the safe place, but you also need to be able to reach out and find the help that they need. And that's another reason why we have a church family. So you protect your kids. And I want to tell you, it's when the storms hit that they really learn the values that you're teaching them. When Katie was in middle school, she just wants to be everybody's friend. And she was trying to befriend this person. And this particular girl was just, pretty much into herself and was very narcissistic in her behavior and just wouldn't let anybody get close to her. And Katie just, wanted to be her friend and just felt rebuffed and felt pushed back and just was dealing with all that. And so Katie was feeling rejected, and she would just come home and she'd want to talk about it. And sometimes we would say, and we would just listen, and then we would just say, you just be yourself. And then one day she came home and she says, you're not going to believe what happened. She said, I was in the restroom, and that friend walked in with some other friends, and they didn't know I was in there. And that person was just really mad and upset, and was talking about how nobody likes me and everybody's against me, and just was going on and on. And then said, the only person that is nice to me in this school is Katie. And Katie realized, okay, I'm making a difference. In my pain and my hurt, she realized, and I was so thankful, God, thank you for letting her hear those words. And now that person is a neurosurgeon, and they stay in touch, and she even told Katie, she said, I went into this, I went into surgery because I don't have to talk to people. But you protect your kids. You teach them values, especially in the storms. Number 3, you have fun with your kids. You got to have fun with them. God intends for families to be a haven for happiness, a place of fun, your home needs to be the place that your kids want to always bring their friends to. That's what we tried to do in our house. It was to create that place that our kids would want to bring their friends. And one time for ladies' night out, we had this national speaker, and she was over at the house before she came to speak at Gateway. And Mac was, I guess he was in late high school at that point, and so he happened to come into the house, and he was talking to our friend Ellie, and all of a sudden she said, Mac, she said, I want to ask you a question. He said, all right. He said, tell me one thing your parents did right. I'm sitting there, oh no. And he said, the one thing I really appreciate about my parents is they always loved and accepted my friends. Well, I said, that's great, because that meant we really did make home a fun place. And that his friends and Katie's friends would want to be there and would want to hang out. And, one of Mac's closest friends, our birthday's on the same day. And so we have a running game every year about who's going to get in touch with who's first. And I was talking to him the other day. He says, you really are my best friend. And I said, I thought Mac was your best friend. He said, no, you are. And I thought, oh, good, I got something on him. And I thought, cool. What's so neat is now some of our best friends are our kids' friends. And that's a blessing. That's a huge blessing. Your home needs to be a place where your kids can kick back, relax, and have a good time. And one of the reasons that we got a lake cabin up at Lake Hartwell was to create that place for our family, because the demands on the life of my two kids are massive, and it just is nonstop. And they love going to the lake. So, Katie just loves crawling up in a chair and just reading a book, and not have to worry about the responsibilities that she has. Mac loves to get out on his jet ski where he's away from his cell phone and he can just be alone and just be out there. And so we love that. We wanted to create that safe place to go. And you need to have that safe place. Your home always needs to be that safe place for your kids where they can be themselves. The Bible says in Psalms 127, children are a gift from God. You need to enjoy your gifts. Amen. And your children are a gift. You remember The Sound of Music? You remember how strict Captain Von Trapp was? I mean, he had little whistle sounds for each of his kids, and they had to march and drill and all this stuff. Man, that wasn't a place of fun until that lady came in. What was her name? Maria? And so, yeah, that's right. How do you solve a problem like Maria? So Maria came in, and she brought fun to the house. And all of a sudden, there was life. If you want your kids to come home after they're gone, you make it a fun place. In Deuteronomy 16, it says, this is a time to celebrate before the Lord your God at the designated place of worship. He will choose for his name to be honored. Celebrate with your sons and daughters. Be their cheerleaders. Pray together with them. Ecclesiastes 11 says, when people live to be very old, let them rejoice in every day of their life. You see, the fact is your kids aren't going to be with you forever. And that's the reason why on Mother's Day or baby dedication, I give each mother of their newborn, I give them a big jar full of marbles, and there's one marble for every month for 18 years. And I tell them, I said, either once a month or on their birthday, you take out the marbles. So on their birthday, you take out 12 marbles. Because you're going to be reminded how quickly the marbles are going away. And they're going to be gone. And I was talking to one mother, and I said, how are you doing with your marbles? She said, well, I'm not taking them out. I said, well, that's good, but it doesn't change the facts. It just changes your perception. And I was talking to one dad recently, and he's got a son who's 13 years old, and we were talking about some things, and then I said, has it dawned on you yet that in 5 years he's gone? He looked at me, he said, well, it didn't until now. I said, think about that. 5 years, they're gone. You got to enjoy the moments. You got to rejoice with your kids. Parenting is a season for life, so you better enjoy it while you have it. And, this little side note before we get to the last point. One of the things that we prayed for our kids regularly was that they would have godly mentors in their life, because I realized I remember the first time Max started talking with this other guy, and I was sitting there going, hey, dude, I'm the pastor. I got all the answers. And he said, right, that's why I don't want them. And and he was talking to this other guy, and it was a guy who was a friend of mine, and I thought, okay, great. And I realized, oh, there are going to be other people speaking into my kids' lives. And I can look, and there's several people in this church that had huge impact on my kids' lives. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And that they spoke into my kids' life. They helped disciple them. And there's still, both of them have people that speak into their lives today. So one of the things that I pray for my adult kids that are in their 30s, I pray for godly people to always be coming along to speak into their life and to mentor them, to encourage them. Because it does take more than just the parents. So be praying for those individuals that, like if you've got a kid that's away from the Lord and they're out of the house now and they're just not walking with God, pray for a godly person to come along that they'll connect with and can help reestablish those foundational stones in their life. And so pray that God will raise up that kind of person for your child. So pray for those mentors. Now, number 4, the last point. Point your kids to God. If you want to have a healthy family, you got to point them to God. Ephesians 6:4, it says fathers, but I want to tell you, it really means parents. So don't take it that this is all on the dads. I mean, this is on the moms and the dads. So fathers, do not provoke your children to anger by the way you treat them. Rather, bring them up with the discipline and instruction that comes from the Lord. You see, I think the most important lesson that we get to teach our kids is about knowing and loving God. The bottom line of parenting is pointing your kids to God. That's the bottom line. You see, you don't have all the answers. And you've got to point them to God. You won't always be there for them. You've got to point them to God. One day you'll be gone. But God will never be gone. You've got to point them to the Lord. The Bible says in Proverbs 9:10, fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. You want to teach your kids wisdom? You teach them the fear of the Lord and what that means. The only thing, the only person we're to ever fear, according to the Bible, is the Lord. And the word fear, it means something very different than the way we think about it. It's not this cower away and hide away, but rather just deep respect and deep admiration and an awe of holy God. Fear of the Lord is the foundation of wisdom. Knowledge of the Holy One results in good judgment. I mean, don't you wish for your kids that they just make good decisions? I mean, I know that's what I wanted my kids. I said, I just hope they make good decisions, especially when they were, teenagers and they'd walk out of the house and you're saying, hey, remember, you're representing the family name here. So, the decisions you make, they affect all of us. And so if I want to help my kids to have good judgment, then it's the knowledge of holy God that gives it to them. Amen. So teaching your kids to fear holy God is what gives them wisdom, is what gives them good judgment. In Philippians 3:8, it says, yes, everything else is worthless compared with the infinite value of knowing Christ Jesus my Lord. For his sake, I have discarded everything else, counting it all garbage, so that I can gain Christ. There's the foundational statement. You teach that to your kids. I was talking to a young man who's kind of starting out in life a while back. And he's a believer. And I asked him, I said, so what's your goal in life? What's your purpose in life? Why do you think you're here? And he looked at me and he said, to make more money than my dad. And I pushed him a little bit on that. I said, really? I said, well, what do you mean? I mean, your dad's very successful. He said, I know. I just want to make more money than him. I said, well, why? He said, so I can have all the stuff I want. You think he's setting himself up for a huge disappointment? I hope there's somebody there to pick up all the pieces for him when that happens. The fear of the Lord is the foundation of everything else. The bottom line is healthy families are not an accident. It's intentional, built by wise parents who do wise things. And it starts with a commitment. Several thousand years ago, a guy named Joshua stood in front of an entire nation and he said, choose this day what you're going to do. But as for me and my house, we're going to serve the Lord. So it starts with a commitment. So parents, moms, and dads, have you said that about your family? Have you made that decision about your family? If you're out to help your kids win the popularity contest and be the Mr. Cool and Mrs. Cool on campus, you're setting them up for a disaster. But if you want to do everything right, it starts with you deciding, we're going to serve the Lord. For me and my house, we're going to be a healthy family, and we're going to serve the Lord. And the way you help your kids to know holy God is by making sure they know holy Jesus. That's how they get to know the holy God, is through his son Jesus. So where's your commitment to that? Because again, they're watching, they're listening, they know if it's real in your life or not. If your kids have not made that decision about Jesus, you should not let a day go by that you're not praying for that decision for them. If your kids are already gone and maybe they've walked away from the Lord, not a day should go by that you're not praying for that kid to return to the Lord, to pray for a godly person to come into their life that will influence them and draw them back. If you want to be a healthy family, here it is. This is the way you do it. Now, I want to close by saying something to a few of you. There are many in our church who, for whatever reason, have never been able to have kids. There are many in our church. Or you've just been single your whole life, and so you've never had the opportunity to have children. I want to encourage you that there are the opportunities to parent. There are thousands of kids just in our community that need a parent. And there's so many ways of doing that. I mean, it may be just mentoring a kid at school that needs help. It may be being a part of our ministry in the apartment complex, helping kids with homework and just being a positive influence in their life. It may mean something a little more extensive, like being a foster parent or the total commitment of being an adoptive parent. I mean, whatever it is, if that's a missing thing in your life, at least be willing to let God tell you if he wants you to be a parent to another child. At least be willing to ask God that question. And then let him tell you what his plan is for you. Because maybe he wants to use you to help someone else to have a healthy family. Maybe that's part of your purpose. Ask God about that. So let me pray with you.